Right, well, let's move on to some Irish stuff then. The FAI Junior Cup was on at the weekend. Shane, you were at it. It was Newmarket Celtic and St Michael's AFC. Newmarket came out on top on penalties. This is the prestige of junior football in Ireland, and a lot of these players probably could play in the League of Ireland at some level, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting because you get this a lot, particularly when it comes to the FAI Cup first round, which we're going to have I was going to say pretty soon. No, I don't think it's till June, where you get
next month.
Yeah, well, it is when I said meant pretty soon, as in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah, when
each game at a time. Each game, I suppose.
You get people who are very wrapped up in junior football will, particularly if they're involved with one of the top junior sides, will often make the argument that you know I've seen some League of Ireland First Division games, and junior football is easily as good as League of Ireland First Division. It's not, right? It's not. Is the first point I make, and quite often the FAI Cup first round fixtures show that. All right, in terms of the results. Where I think people are getting mixed up is there could be 2 to 3 players within a team who are easily capable of playing League of Ireland First Division in particular. The issue is that that's 2 or 3 players of that standard playing against 11 players of that standard. And it's not how strong is your strongest players, it's how weak are your weakest players, because they're the ones who will get picked off. And that's where the difference will be when teams like of those standards come up against each other in the FAI Cup. But it is definitely interesting to talk about the ones that are good enough. I have a real thing for trying to find a gem in junior or intermediate football, and trying to bring them in at League of Ireland level, because there's a roughness about them. Do you know what I mean? And I mean rough edges more so than the physicality. Yeah. Sometimes the physicality too, actually, to be fair, that definitely works in their favour. The academy structure is brilliant, and there's so many pluses coming out of the fact that League of Ireland clubs now have control at a young age. But the whole thing of being overcoached is a thing. It is definitely a thing. And when you find a player who maybe, for whatever reason, late developer or just not getting the breaks, didn't step in at League of Ireland academy level, there is something different about them. They don't always make the right decision, but sometimes not always making the right decision can be a good thing, because everybody makes all the right decisions. The team without the ball know the decisions you're going to make. Whereas the next thing you throw in a wild card who hasn't come through that structure, makes kind of independent decisions that, okay, sometimes go against them, but when they work for him, all of a sudden it can open up a game. So it can. And look, there are, I suppose, to go through a couple of examples before I talk about 1 or 2 of my own personal situations. So the most famous is definitely Mark O'Sullivan, right? So John Caulfield, manages Avondale, gets the Cork City job, comes in at Cork City, brings in, intermediate centre forward Mark O'Sullivan, who was, to be fair, a standout player at that level, but brings him in and is an absolute revelation. I think possibly won League of Ireland Premier Division Player of the Year that year. Has gone from amateur football to the best centre forward in the entire League of Ireland in that following season, pretty much. And he was, he was one of these. He was one of these. Off the building site kind of fellas. I think he genuinely was off the building site. I think he was, working as a brickie or labouring and that kind of thing. And he just had this rawness about him where he fought you. He wanted to fight you every game. He wasn't going to give you a minute on the ball, and he was hassling and harrying. But he had ability too, obviously, and he could finish. That's for sure. He could certainly finish. And John definitely, he's like myself. John looks for that kind of player. He definitely goes looking for that kind of player. I know of a couple of players that he had in on trial from amateur levels there before the season started. He ended up not signing one of them, but he does, so from our point of view, the one that we got that worked out unbelievably well, obviously, again, to go back to him, is Lee Grace. So Lee had not played in the underage structure in the League of Ireland. He's playing for his local junior club. Have I told you how we got Lee Grace? Apologies if I'm going back over an old story here, right? But I have to give credit. I do enough giving out about referees. I was managing Wexford, and after a game, everybody had cleared off, and the referee came into me and said, "Listen, Shane," he says, "I'm still refereeing local junior football as well." He says, in the Waterford League. He says, "Look, maybe I'm wrong." He says, "But there's a young lad at Carrick." He says, "No, geez, I think he's excellent. He says, I can't understand how
Yeah.
he hasn't been playing at this level. So I went down the following weekend to watch Carrick play, and I thought he was top notch. And we went and we took him for lunch and had a chat with his dad. His dad was quite an influence on him, and that took him for lunch and the whole lot. And like we signed him, and he was outstanding for us. He was a huge part of us winning the league. I went to Galway, immediately brought him to Galway with me. And 4 months at Galway, and the next thing Shamrock Rovers are putting in a fairly substantial bid for him, and he's off to Shamrock Rovers, and he's playing in Europe for the last 3-4 seasons in a row. I would argue is arguably the best centre half in the league, thereabouts. Anyway,
We put me team of the year last year.
did you? Good man. I mean, that's all happened for League Race in the space of 2.5 years. Like, unbelievable that you can go
What age was he?
21 when I brought him in.
And that's interesting because even you mentioned Mark O'Sullivan, like he would have been at a different age. He would have been kind of older. He was kind of late 20s, wasn't he? Would have been
even later, yeah.
So like it could go one or two ways for both of those players. You could get a young lad like say Lee Grace who stands out that level in Waterford because it's easy for them and you can cruise through it. And then when he steps up and it's a bit tougher, whether or not he wanted to actually go on and do it and say, you know what, actually I prefer living my life.
And you've hit the nail on the head there, because really what will it come down to? It will come down to attitude.
Yeah.
It will come down to attitude 100%. I mean, you want to talk about the older
That's
ones.
the reason why a lot of the lads who play LSL, who are smashing footballers,
Yeah.
but are absolute melts.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the
They
reason
want
why
the social life, or they don't have the greater the desire or whatever it is. You talk about the older ones. I mean, I had two at Wexford. Aidan Keenan was unbelievable for me, but I signed a 31-year-old goalkeeper. He made his League of Ireland debut at 31 years of age and then proceeded to play every minute of every game for 5 consecutive seasons for me. You know, there are guys out there.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is, there are guys out there, and quite a few managers around the place will know they're out there, know they're good enough, but you actually can't get them, right? So you had 2 prime examples in the FAI Junior Cup final on Saturday evening, right? So Owen Hayes and Jimmy Carr. Owen Hayes for Newmarket Celtic, Jimmy Carr for St. Michael's. Like, anybody in that outside of Dublin, probably that, let's call it west region, like, these are not undiscovered diamonds. These are diamonds that we all know about. I'll be speaking to them, Tommy Barrett will be speaking to them, John Caulfield might be speaking to them. We'll all be speaking to them because they're 2 class acts, and I mean they've been absolute mainstays of the Irish international amateur team for the last 10 years. Owen Hayes will be centre forward, Jimmy Carr will be on the left wing. You can be nailed on, they'll always be there. But for one reason or another, I did approach the Jimmy Carr one. That kind of got shut down early. It was made fairly clear to me without me ever speaking to Jimmy Carr directly that just wasn't a runner. Owen Hayes, I took Owen for lunch. I gave him a massive sales pitch. I was manager of Galway United at the time, and that's actually what worked against me, was the fact that, you talk about the advantages of full-time over part-time. Well, this is one of the disadvantages of full-time over part-time. Owen's a clever boy. He's a teacher in a secondary school, I think in around Ennis kind of area. And we trained in the morning at Galway, and he wasn't going to give up his career, or he wasn't going to give up his full-time job, for something that may or may not work out. Now, I would have argued that there was no not working out. Like, to me, he is the real one that I was really, really annoyed that I couldn't get, because he's a class act. And he produced the one supreme moment of quality in Saturday night's game came from Owen again, where he skipped past 2 boys before being pulled down for the penalty. He's an outstanding player, but was I annoyed not to get him? But from his point of view, sure, he couldn't give up. You're not going to give up your full-time teaching job.
He'd be giving up his summers as well.
In your mid to late 20s. Yeah. For a rattle at a League of Ireland thing that may or may not work out. And you get plenty of guys like that. I actually tried to sign them as a package. I tried to sign him and his teammate Stephen Kelly, who scored the winning penalty in the penalty shootout Saturday night. But again, Stephen was working kind of shift work and that kind of stuff, and circumstances sometimes just don't allow.
And he played a hurling.
Player what?
He played a hurling as well.
Yeah. Well, I've had League of Ireland players who play. I'm definitely one of the managers who have no problem with a League of Ireland player playing a bit of hurling or a bit of Gaelic football, here and there as well. But yeah, look, there really is. There's some fantastic look. I don't want to be giving things away, but we have one that we've pretty much agreed with. Their club have agreed it. There's no problem, or they're happy enough for him to move on. We can't sign him until after the 1st of June. It may or may not work out when it comes in. I think he could be a revelation. I think he could be an absolute revelation. So I do. And they're there to be got. They really, really are. You just before we started recording, you commented on Dickie, Dan Kelly.
Dan Kelly, yeah. St. Pat's, he was at St. Pat's YC, wasn't
St. Pat's YC. That's where he was when
when
Boaz brought him in. Similar with Danny Grant. Danny Grant was playing Leinster Senior League when Boaz brought him in. I mean, there are some that go the other way. Like, you know, you look at. So the top goal scorer to the best of my knowledge anyway, top goal scorer in Leinster Senior League at the moment would be Gareth McCaffrey, right? Ripping it up, banging him in. Gareth McCaffrey's had 2 or 3 goals at the League of Ireland without it ever really lighting up for him. You know, so you're looking there and you're going, yes, he is outstanding at Leinster Senior League, but why, you know, he's been there, it hasn't quite worked, even though he's an outstanding player. I don't know why it hasn't quite translated to League of Ireland. It's no more than a fella in the League of Ireland going across to England.
Yeah.
Sometimes the ones you think are nailed on to be able to make the step up doesn't work, and then other ones where they mightn't have been the outstanding player in the League of Ireland, but yet they've gone across the water and all of a sudden it has. You know, you can never be 100% sure when you're coming from amateur up to the League of Ireland First Division.
Just all different factors, isn't it? I think Anthony, different factors like between say the manager, teammates, how you settle into an environment. Just even little things like just your confidence when you come in, if you score early, stuff, little bits like that. But then also what you're like as a fella in terms of how you take the opportunity as well, and how you deal with the different pressure that comes with it. Because as you say, it is true. Like the difference is massive between, especially now where especially in the Premier Division where every club is full time.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
And the one other thing that works against us as a League of Ireland manager trying to bring in an amateur player is I'm not sure if you'd be overly aware of the rules, but basically once you play a minute in the League of Ireland, that's it, and you don't even have to be a pro. You can be. So we don't have pros. Well, we've 2 pros, I think, at Cove.
Right.
So once they play for Cove, they don't have to be on a pro contract. They can have been on an amateur contract at Cove. Once they play a minute in the League of Ireland, that's it. You can never play international football for your country's amateur team again. So the likes of Owen Hayes, if Owen Hayes had signed for me, that's it. He can't see how it works out and then go back to playing for Ireland.
That's very
it's a huge part of their decision.
I'm guessing that must be the same because I did a piece on Newmarket on the basis like it's a youth hurling town in Clare as well, and like, a lot of the players do play hurling.
And he's a fine hurler.
Yeah, they keep playing for the hurling. And he was very interesting on here in terms of it's a very grown up relationship that. Because of how the seasons are, that if they're in the business end like they are now, they have a bit of time. Yeah. If the season had been finished in, he would have kind of been in doing more hurling now. But like, say, I wonder if that's the same because the Irish amateur squad was actually named.
They were in Spain at the
weekend.
Weren't they?
Yeah. So say Harvey Cullinan, I think it was his name. He was playing centre back for Newmarket, but he came back from Sheffield United. It's very interesting speaking to the club because they were saying how like they'll lose a few players now to League of Ireland academies, and they're getting lads back now at 19, 20, disillusioned a little bit, and a few of them come back and they're the lucky ones because they want to stay involved. Other lads have just packed it in completely. Whereas with Harvey, he was the more traditional story in the sense of had a couple of years at Sheffield United. I think he'd only signed another contract with them last year, but then wanted to come home and wanted to play. And even again, Paddy Purcell, who's the manager of Newmarket and would have been involved in the League of Ireland down through the years, he was saying to him, listen, you're too good to be signing for us here. But he wanted to play with his mates, he wanted to be back home in his hometown, and that's an interesting one because I wonder he probably couldn't play for that amateur team because he was a pro with Sheffield United. Because again, he's another player who you're looking at. You speak to people at the club and they weren't just saying it because he's one of their own, but they were like even before he signed for them, he was knocking back League of Ireland clubs because he just wanted to be back in with some of his pals, you know.
Yeah. Well, your man Joe Call, he came back, the goalkeeper from Man United a couple of years ago, and Harps wanted him and Derry wanted him, and then he just ended up. He played a year in League of Ireland, and then he went. He's
playing for lunch,
playing junior football again in Donegal.
No, I didn't take him for lunch. I don't think.
Yeah, he was playing for I can't remember what team against us this season in the junior leagues in Donegal. So I mean, like there are players that are knocking around that have been there and done that across and have come back.
Mikey Drennan's playing with Evergreen at the moment. You know, there's
Carl Shepard retired, but he was playing for Malahide in the United Churches League.